It was deja vu all over again at the state capitol square last Saturday. That's when an estimated crowd of between 30 and 40,000 marched, rallied, and gathered recall signatures. It was a political pep rally to fire up for the ongoing recall push against Governor Scott Walker and Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch. We want to know, did you talk politics around the Thanksgiving family table? That may have been a risky conversation given how divided our state has become. Joining this table, two people on opposite sides, former Commerce Secretary to Governor Tommy Thompson, Bill McCoshen, and the Executive Director of One Wisconsin Now, Scott Ross. And thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Well, Scott Ross, first to you, how's the recall effort going against Governor Walker now in its second week? Is it as energized as you had expected?
Well, I mean, seeing that, in just 4 days they had collected 105,000 signatures from people all across Wisconsin who are rejecting the failed policies of Governor Walker is quite heartening to those who support the recall of Walker.
It would seem that, the early push, people coming to you, as it were, to sign the petition is kind of a different matter than having to go out and get those signatures all the way up to as many as 700,000.
Well, it sounds like there is a very aggressive and professional effort going on in communities across Wisconsin to get those signatures. And, again, the reason it's happening is because Governor Walker is the one who's responsible for tearing apart Wisconsin. His unprecedented tax breaks to corporations, his dismantling of public education, cutting 65,000 people off of health care, including 29,000 children, and destroying the rights of 175,000 working Wisconsinites.
So, Bill McCoshen, your response to this recall effort?
I would say, the operating assumption on the Republican side is that the recall organizers would get the signatures, whether it's 500, 600, they need 540,000 signatures. I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, we're 9 days into this, and I'm told that their new number is about 165,000. That's a long way from 540,000. And truthfully, all the energy will be at the front end of this, not at the back end. You still have Thanksgiving, you have Christmas. I think each passing day it gets harder and harder to get those signatures, so I would have expected them to be halfway home after a week, and they're a long way from that.
Scott Ross, what do you say to critics who condemn this effort because of the cost of the state and local government?
Well, I think there are a lot of people out there who feel that the cost of not doing something in the face of what Governor Walker has done is much higher. I mean, again, Governor Walker's promise, he's going to create jobs. He hands over the Treasury to corporations. He divides the state and tears it apart. And what do we get out of it? Well, Wisconsin lost 10,000 jobs last month, the most in the state, or the most in the nation. And our neighbors to the south gained 30,000 jobs in Illinois.
In the last 18 months of the Doyle administration, Wisconsin lost 165,000 jobs. Those are the facts. In the first 10 months of the Walker administration, there's a net gain of about 12,000. It's not as much as any of us would like. It's a long way from the 250,000 goal, but we had a net job gain, so that's a fairly significant turnaround that this governor should get credit for.
How tough is that number, though, that last month Wisconsin lost more jobs than any state in the country?
Yeah, obviously it's disappointing. I mean, his number one priority, he had two when he ran. One was to get our state's fiscal house in order, and that's really what the genesis of this recall is all about. He made some tough decisions. He committed to those during the election, and now people are saying we want a do-over. Well, truthfully, I think, voters are saying enough's enough. We're tired of these recalls. Let's move on. We may not like him personally, but he's our guy, and he's going to be there till 2014.
Let me stay with you, Bill McCoshen, and ask about trying to change the redistricting law so that it takes effect for any recall election that might happen. Is that an advantage that the governor needs?
Doesn't affect him. I mean, he's got to run statewide. So his map is the same under any set of circumstances. So is Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch.
For the senators.
But if recall organizers are able to get enough signatures for 3 additional Republican state senators, obviously they would have a stronger advantage if they could run on the new maps, which were passed last summer, rather than the old maps.
What do you think about this move on the part of the GOP on redistricting?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because it seems like just another power grab, just another situation where if the Republicans don't like the rules, then they rewrite the rules. And when you want to talk about costs, I mean, how much more, we've already spent, upwards of $500,000 on private law firms that the Republicans contracted with to do redistricting. And now we're going to have to pay more because they don't like the law that they passed?
It's the first time in 30 years that the legislature has passed and the governor has signed a redistricting plan in Wisconsin. So Yes, it's being challenged, but I think it'll hold up in court, and we're likely to see the new maps sooner rather than later.
We've seen the governor's message in a couple of new campaign spots this week. What is his message, and will it be enough to sway voters?
Yeah, I think it will. He's going on the air. Obviously he's back in campaign mode to stave off this recall, and I think he's going to be successful. Whether or not they get the signatures, even if they do, I think he's going to survive the recall. I think people understand that tough decisions had to be made.
Scott Ross, what about trying to mount this effort and push this recall without a named candidate?
Well, I don't think that that doesn't surprise me because the first step is getting the signatures. And I think that when you look and you were talking about the ad that that Governor Walker's running, I mean, sort of the fraud of his administration is dictated in that ad. I mean, the school board members from Waukesha. Well, the only reason Waukesha didn't have massive cuts is because it got a over $10 million legal settlement this year. I mean, next year we're going to see schools absolutely devastated. There's a report already out that says 97% of Wisconsin school districts saw their funds fall. And that is going to cripple our future when it comes to providing our kids with a good public education so they do have those tools to succeed.
But Walker opponents keep moving the goalposts. They said the world was going to end this September with public education in Wisconsin, and it clearly didn't. In almost 75% of the cases, teachers were added, budgets were saved. In those districts that actually took advantage of the tools that the governor gave them, they saved money. Milwaukee, for example, saved $25 million just with the collective bargaining changes.
Yeah, but you'll admit that a lot of that has to do with Recovery Act money that is still in the pipeline but will be gone next year, and we are going to see massive school closures.
I think more than half of that money is still in the pipeline. It never got out.
And higher class sizes. I mean, those things that are proven tools for getting kids a good quality public education so they can move on to have good jobs. Unfortunately, since we keep losing jobs, there might not be jobs out there for them.
Let's move on to the U.S. Senate race. Bill McCoshen, former Governor Tommy Thompson, is finally in, announcing his candidacy.
Next week.
Next week. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't call it a done deal yet. But how does he compete with the young gun, Jeff Fitzgerald, with his recent successes, if you would call them those, in the legislature?
I think it's going to be a great race. Obviously, the primary, a lot of folks probably thought Tommy Thompson could clear the field. Well, there are some new faces on the political horizon, including the Speaker, Jeff Fitzgerald, and potentially State Senator Frank Lassay and former Congressman Mark Newman. And truthfully, the prospect of a primary has the governor all fired up. And I haven't seen him this energized in a long time. And one thing they got to understand about going against him, he's undefeated statewide. He's run and won statewide 4 times with bigger and bigger margins each time, and he's going to be ready to play to win.
Scott Ross, how does the very liberal Dane County Democrat Congresswoman Tammy Baldwin compete?
Well, I think she competes on a record, and that's getting things done. I mean, whether it's helping to pass historic health reform, making sure that women have access to breast cancer and cervical treatments, making sure veterans have access to health care. Tammy Baldwin is one of the people who was most responsible for the fact that if you're 26 and you don't have health insurance, you're able to stay on your parents' health insurance. I mean, I think that that's a record of success, as well as opposing the very policies that got us into this mess. The unpaid-for tax cuts for the rich for George Bush.
You're getting too much time here.
Yeah, I think it will be an election about their records. And I'm pretty comfortable where Tommy Thompson sits in that debate.
All right, I'm getting the big wrap. Thanks very much.